And if I'm being asked to do more work, I would like to also then talk about the increase in pay. Welcome to Coaching with Ricky. I'm Ricky, and these are your questions answered. How long do I wait to circle back with my manager on a raise that they promised? Ooh, this is a good one. So if this question is coming up, I'm assuming that you had previously already had a conversation with them since you said they promised. One thing I want to first start off with is there are no promises in life. So the fact that your manager may have promised you something doesn't mean it's 100% going to be true. I've seen things change so quickly, so rapidly, and sometimes not to the fault of anyone, but things just happen. So in general, I usually don't like having promises, especially when it comes to promotions or things like that, because you just never know. And I've been behind the scenes of all the approval processes and the chains of commands that have to take place in a corporate setting. So it's really hard to guarantee something 100% because you never know what will happen. Anyway, back to the question. So if you've already started this conversation with your manager, that's a good sign. It's a good thing that you're having this honest and direct conversation about pay, because sometimes people feel very uncomfortable talking about it. And what that does is it builds up resentment over time because people are constantly adding more and more work. And the more work they do, the more they're hoping that they're getting more pay. But if you're not talking about this with your manager up front, that can build up a lot of resentment and frustration on your end, and eventually that becomes an explosive event, or you get to a point where you're just burnt out and you don't care anymore. That's what we want to avoid. So in terms of when you should be bringing up this conversation again, there's no real magic number in terms of the number of days or number of weeks. What I will say is don't be that person that constantly follows up. So if you've had a conversation with your manager last week about this and you haven't heard anything back yet, don't follow up right away. Maybe give it another week or so. Give it some space and time, because sometimes things move pretty slowly. And when you see that there's no action being taken place behind the scenes, sometimes there are actions being taken place. It's just taking more time and more conversations. And rather than focusing on when you should be following up, the important part behind this question is really how you should be following up and what you should be talking about. So usually when someone approaches a pay conversation, what that conversation is centered around typically is around me and what I want, right? But instead, if you focus the conversation more objectively around the work that needs to take place, because at the end of the day, we're talking about a job and you should be paid fairly for your job. So instead of just focusing on yourself and saying, me, I want this, that can come across sometimes in a certain way for managers, especially managers that may not be self-reflective or as empathetic as you would like. It can be received in the wrong way. So instead, whenever we have these types of conversations around pay, it's always important to message it around the focus on the work that is taking place. So what I mean by that is if you're having more and more responsibilities being added to your plate, that is a great opportunity for you to say, I would love to take on more work and continue to learn and continue to deliver for the team and for the company. At the same time, with that increase in scope and increase in responsibility, I would like to talk about the increase in pay accordingly. That is a very fair and reasonable conversation, as opposed to if you were just solely going to focus on, well, I want more pay, I want more money, I want more promotion, I want this title. That can be received in the wrong way, even though ultimately what you're trying to drive is the same outcome. So it really matters how you approach this conversation. And if you focus objectively on the work itself, that removes some pressure on your end also, especially if you're feeling a certain way or you're feeling nervous about wanting to advocate for yourself or asking for more money and you feel a little bit uneasy about it. The fact that you're focusing on just talking about the work itself sometimes can help remove that pressure. And ultimately what that does is, from a manager standpoint, they will look at you and think, oh, this makes sense because your span of responsibility is increasing and you're having a very mature and direct conversation about the quality of your work and the output of what you produce for the team and for the company, and also being clear about what your expectations are and what your desires are and what's important to you. And for a lot of people, financial stability and the money aspect of doing a great job is important for them. So it's important to have that conversation with your manager in a very honest and genuine way. And to just wrap it up and answer the original question, while there isn't a perfect time in terms of a number of days, number of weeks of when you should follow up, a reasonable amount of time would be probably around 2 to 3 weeks from the initial conversation, where you set the expectation of wanting to talk about your pay and wanting some action and next steps to get to that eventual outcome that you're looking for. Then they'll have exactly what they need in order to do that if you're constantly communicating to them what's important to you. Very fun question as usual, and I'm looking forward to answering more of your questions in the future. Bye for now.